Back again, and welcome back to what is going to be a short video just to add some CSS to our current application that we're building. And we've already got all the features built in that we need to display our style sheets, but I'm going to quickly walk you through how that works and how we go about implementing some CSS and JavaScript within our application. So you see I've got my editor open, and take it to my apps directory. In my templates directory, you can see we've got a layout.html file. Right now, this is the file that is going to be displayed on any template that extends this particular template. And you can see that we've got the document head that's defined within this layout template. Same with the body tag and the closing HTML tag. Right, so all we display our content is using this yield function, and we can define content region, which is how we actually input content within certain regions within the HTML document. Right, so you can also see that we yield a title within this title block. We can effectively yield any region that we want within the document head. So for example, I could say, bring this down a bit, I could say meta, it could be char set and close. So obviously you wouldn't do this or want to set this on every template, but you could set this globally. But you can imagine we could do like a meta description tag, meta keyword tag, meta auto tag, and for each template that extends this layout template, we can define those regions. So as another example, let's just get rid of this. As another example, let me load up one of my, for example, let's load up the security controller. You can see our security controller, we extend that layout, that HTML template. So let me switch my screen. So now we're looking at the home page actually. So let's go to our login page. You can see we're displaying our login form. In the top bit right here, in the tab bar, you can see it's saying localhost login, and that's because we haven't defined that title block that we've defined within the layout.html template. So let's look at the source. You can see that title block is pretty much empty. So if I take you back to my editor, and within the title, I'm going to create a block so I can put a title that represents this particular template. And all we do that is simple curly braces, %, and we yield the yield that we created is a title block, because back in the layout it says title, right? So we're going to say block title, just like so. I will need to end that block as well, end block, and in between is where we're going to put the title. So we're going to say let's call this login, something as simple as that. Let's go back to our browser. I'm going to reload, and you can see now it says login. Right, so that is how we sort of like add blocks to our document. So if I go back onto my main page, reload, you can see now it says login at the very top in that tab. So back in our editor, I can pretty much, if I go to my layouts.html template, I can pretty much yield any content or any content region that I want to be able to define within specific templates. Right now, when we come to adding CSS and JavaScript, I've got a couple of methods that's going to help us generate those content. And all we have to do is in our document head, we say curly brace, @ symbol, close curly brace, and within that I'm going to pass in a method called add CSS, just like so. Now, the curly brace at curly brace is a special syntax. Is a special syntax for MagmaCore framework, and what this allows us to do is to pass in our own custom method that we've actually defined within framework. Now, there's other syntax that we can use to display content, like for example we could say curly brace, which is used to echo a variable, just like so. So we could say name, and that would echo a variable. We got other ones such as triple curly braces that essentially escape any variable using HTML special chars, right? Let's just fix that up properly. So it's triple curly braces, and with simple just echo the variable in between, just like so. And if we're using any PHP functions, we say curly brace %, and close curly brace, and we can pretty much put any PHP function in between those blocks, right? So let's get rid of that for now. And the one that we want is our own special syntax that recognize our own method. And this is a method that we've got defined within my Ash templating engine, which I'm going to show you right now. So if I go down to my vendor directory, go down to MagmaCore, get the source, and it's in Ash, and that is located within my template, within the traits, and it's going to be template traits, right? And let's just collapse this sidebar, and this is the add CSS method. This method is reading from our assets.yml file, and within that YAML file we've got two separate blocks that we've defined, one for scripts and one for our styles, right? So you can see we're fetching the YAML file, we're fetching the assets YAML file, and we're accessing the style sheets array. Sorry, it's not called styles, it's called style sheets array. And that's going to return all the styles that we've defined within that YAML file, and it's going to return a massive array which we're going to iterate through it, and we're going to display any style sheet that we've set to enable. So if I bring up one of those YAML files for us so we can see what it looks like. So if we go to config and assets, this is our assets.yml file, and this defines, or this is where we define all of our assets for our application, right? So you can see I've already got predefined stuff that I've taken from my very own project, and I've just brought it across. But it's pretty simple in what it's doing. So we've defined the style sheet, which is what we're calling right here. It's going to return all this array, all that is contained within that style sheet array. It's going to return it as a giant array so we can iterate over it and only display the styles that is set to enable, where enable is equal to true. If enable is equal to false, like this one, then that style sheet won't be displayed on our site. And this is a good way. It's a good way of actually managing all of our assets by enabling and disabling what we want and what we don't want, right? And it's the same process for the scripts. You can see that we've got a few more keys. We've got location, so we can filter where we want these JavaScripts to be loaded. So in the add JavaScript method, an argument that we can specify is the location of where we want that to be loaded. We might want JavaScript to be loaded in the head of the document, or we might want it to be loaded at the very bottom. We've got the option to do that, right? And it's the same process whether it's going to be enable or it's going to be false. And you also notice that we've got a CDN option, which means a content which we could get our style sheet from a content delivery network. And what that is doing is we've got a check which could either be true or false. So if the source is from a CDN, we have to set that to true, because internally that is how we differentiating the path to load the style or the JavaScript from, right? So in our template traits, this is essentially where we're doing that. and we're echoing out a style sheet based on the parameters that we've got defined within these YAML file, this assets.yml file. So this is where we define all of our CSS and JavaScript. We don't do that within the layouts.html file. We're simply going to be calling this add CSS method, and that will load all of our CSS files that we've got that is enabled that we want to display. There's also add JavaScript, and the first argument I'm going to say is in the header, right? So what that's doing is adding any JavaScript that I've defined, that I've said that I want to be loaded in the head section as well. Down at the bottom down here, I'm going to also do the same thing. I'm going to say add JavaScript, just like so, and that will load within the foot, but because by default it loads all JavaScript in the foot, but by specifying the first argument that says header, we're going to load those JavaScript that is set to be loaded in the head, and that is all again defined from within this asset.yml through this location key. So we could say header, or you can say there's some that says footer as well, location ed. We got a lot in it, but we got some that's in the foot as well, right? So that's essentially how we define our scripts. And if you're going to be adding your own scripts, you have to come and do it within this assets.yml file, and then you could define whether you want it to be enabled or not, right? So that's essentially what these two methods are, and they're located within the ash component. So let's close that. And again, this is our asset. Let's just close it as well. And what we want to do now is we're going to go back to the browser, and then we're going to reload and take a look at the source and see what has changed. So if I switch my screen again, I'm going to reload. It's throwing an error, says argument 2 must be of type string. Right, so array merge argument 2 must be type array string given. Right, and I think I know what exactly that error done. I think I've misplaced the argument. So let's go back to our editor, main scene, and this add.js method takes two arguments. Actually, the first argument is an array, which we've not defined. So define an array, and what that array does is allow us to actually pass individual scripts that we want to load. Just another way of loading our scripts in, but we're always going to probably leave it empty for the time being. And the second argument for this particular method is going to be the header, which is what we had before. So let's save that, and let's actually try again. Go back to our browser, let's reload, and you can see now we've got some changes. So if we take a look at the source, view source, let's just reduce this down a bit. Let's have a look and see what's been loaded, right? So you can see that it's loading all the stuff that we've defined within our assets.yml file, and everything that is set to enable true is being loaded. So we've got stuff that's all within the head of our document, but we're going to actually demonstrate some stuff in the footer as well, so you can see how that looks as well. So let's go back to our editor, let's go to our YAML file again, and say that we want to, for demonstration purposes, let's load this transition, this jQuery transition, and this UI kit. Let's find those and load them within the foot and see what happens, right? So let's change our editor. Let's find those two scripts. One is a transition that says load in the header. We're going to change that to footer. And the other one is the UI kit. Let's change that and put that in the footer as well. Save. Go back to our browser. Let's reload. You can see they've disappeared, and they're now down in the foot of our document. So that was a quick demonstration to show that it actually does work, and it will load wherever you've defined it to be loading, or wherever you want it to be loaded. So let's just undo that, back in the head, just like so. Right, so if we take it back to the browser as well, reload, they appear again. We can also set stuff to be disabled, so we can disable UI kit. Let's just disable the first two scripts, our first two style sheets that we've got defined in here. So we just say that's going to be false, and that's going to be false as well. And if we go back to our source, reload, you can see that they have now disappeared as well. So just to demonstrate that we've got full control over all of our assets of how we want to load them. So let's go back to our editor, let's undo those, and let's browser, let's reload again, they appear again, reload. You can see now we've got some style by simply adding in those two methods to our layout.html template. We've now got access to all of our style sheets and JavaScripts. So I'm going to actually put in a couple of HTML element just to wrap my security controller within, so it's a little bit more contained. So if I go back to my editor, let's actually add some HTML that we're going to use to display our content in videos going forward. So if I go back, just close this down, let's go back to my layout.html template, and I'm going to wrap this around some HTML element. So I'm going to say to create a div just like so, and I'm going to give it a class of, say, UK section, and UK section primary, which is going to give it a blue background. And I'm going to say div, I'm going to call that class UK container, and I'm going to say UK container small, which is going to put all the content in the center of our screen. Then I'm going to create a h1 tag, the h1. I'm going to create a span tag. I'm going to yield or create a custom section. I'm going to say curly braces %, this is something new. I'm going to yield a page header, just like so. So in any of our templates that extend in this layout, we can define a page header block that we can place content within this h1 tag. Now I'm going to also create a paragraph tag, and I'm going to give this some CSS style. Say class, give it UK text large, and UK text bolder. Right, I'm going to also create a new content region. I'm going to yield page tagline. Now you can give these whatever names you want, so long as you reference them when you're creating your blocks within your actual HTML templates. Now below this UK container, I'm going to create another container. So I'm going to create a new div tag, give it class UK container, and UK container small, and I'm going to add some margin, UK margin, just like so. And within that, I'm going to add a div tag. I'm going to give it an ID, a flash message. So it's an ID equal flash message, and I'm going to pass in, just going to copy and paste this, which displays all of our flash messages. I'm going to paste it within this div tag, just like so. and I'll get our content region and cut that from there, and I'm simply just going to place this below that div element, just like so. So just adding a little bit of HTML to our application going forward, so we can actually have something a little bit more stylish to look at, right? So I'm going to go back to the browser and I'm going to reload, and we're going to see how that looks. So go to my browser, let's reload, and that's not exactly what I want it to look like. So let's have a look and see where we've gone wrong, and let's go back to our editor. Let's take this out. I don't want this in that blue background. I want this to be separate. So let's put that just outside of that section primary element, and go back to our browser. Let's reload again. Yeah, that's much better, right? That's much more like what the application that I've demonstrated within the second video. This is more what it looks like. So you can see that we've defined a page header and a page tagline, but we've not seen them because we need to also define those within our security template. So if I go back to my editor, let's close that down. Let's go and find our security template. So templates, client, security. Let's get our index template, and this is where we're going to actually define those two blocks, right? So we're going to say block, which is going to be block, it's going to be page header, end block, and we can put something simple as please log in, something as generic as that. Just not put no space, and we're going to define the second one as block, and it's called, we've called it page tagline. So it's page tagline and end block. And we could say something like, again, something generic. Let's just change that to sign up, and let's say please log in to access the site content, something like that, right? So if we go back to our browser, let's reload, you can see now we've got those two block here filled up with what we've just put into those blocks within our index, security index.html template. So that's effectively how we're going to go about adding CSS to all of our, well, the CSS already been added because the layout, that HTML template is a global template, which when you extend into it, you will get all the features that you can see on your screen. Now there's one more additional stuff that I wanted to also add in, and that is custom CSS and custom scripts that we can add in as a per page by page basis. So if I take you back to my editor, let's go back to the layout template. We can define regions that we can add custom CSS in and custom JavaScript. So if I go back up into the head, and I can do something like, let's put it above the JavaScript to say yield. I'm going to call it styles. You can call it whatever we want, right? And below our JavaScript, we could put one for our scripts. So we could say yield scripts, just like so, right? Now if we go to our index, back to the index page that we were just working on, we can define some custom CSS. So let's do something like, let's create the block. So say block, and we call it styles, and let's do a end block down here, end block, and in between those we're going to create a style tag, just like so, and we can do something like body, You can say background, let's do red, something like so, right? So if we go back to our browser and we reload, you can see we've got a red background. Obviously this doesn't look very good, but I'm demonstrating that we can also do custom inline styles on a page by page basis by defining content block within the head and the footer area. We could put our inline styles in. So if I look at the source, you can see that we got that style that we've just added in just below our last style sheet, right? And it will always be below the last style sheet that we've defined within the YAML file, because if you look at where we've defined it below that add CSS method, right? We're yielding any custom styles below that add CSS method. So effectively we can override any CSS that we've got in these classes. We can override them by having those styles below, because the lower it is, the more precedent it's going to take, right? Same with JavaScript, it works just the same. So that's also something else you could add in if you wanted to. So let's have a little quick cleanup before we end this video. So I'm gonna go back to my browser and let's just close this down for a bit. Close that down. Let's get rid of this inline styles because we no longer need that. That was just a demonstration. Let's just get rid of that. Save. Back to our browser. Going to reload. Let's find our security template again and let's remove that security tag, which is in our index file. Let's just get rid of that. We no longer need that. And let's reload. You're not seeing what I'm doing, but I've just reload and it's taken away that security h1 tag that I had just above here, right? So let's go back to my editor and let's look at, we can add some information to this index page. Just let's try and make it like a fully finished page while we're at it, right? So we're back in our index.html template. Let's actually put some HTML tag around this form. So let's say div. I'm going to say class, say UK child width, and that's going to be 1, 2 at s. I mean, I will do a little video in the future on using some of these class elements, which is part of the UIKit framework, which is what I'm using by default. I will also be implementing a way to change that so you can use your own CSS framework if you wanted to, or use a custom CSS that you're going to be building yourself. But at the minute, it's fully wrapped in the UIKit framework. When I do finish that component, you'll be able to change over from UIKit to Bootstrap or to whatever CSS framework that you want to use, right? So until that is finished, we're stuck to using UIKit for the time being. So we got a class with a CSS element, and we're going to say UK grid small, right? Just like so. So I'm going to put a paragraph tag, and I'm going to say class UK, and it's text lead. So I can put some text in this box, like for example, we can say don't have an account yet. We could say register. So we could put below here, we could put an anchor tag, href. We could point that to our registration controller or register, and we could say register, just like so, right? So let's actually take a look at that and see what that's doing for us. So go back to our browser, we can reload, and it's showing at the very top, but I don't actually want it to be at the top. I want it to be below our form. So let's go back to my editor, I'm going to take this and I'm going to load it above this bit of text, just like so. Now let's reload. Let's go back to my browser. Let's reload, just like so. So that's what I want. That's where I want it to be. So I don't have an account yet. Register. So if I click that register button, it's going to take us to our register control. Remember, because our register.html file is also extending into that layout, so the styles will also apply right here as well. So let's go back to my editor. So let's actually try and give this this href, this anchor link, some classes. So I'm going to say class, to say UK button. I'm going to say UK button small. We're going to say UK button text and UK button left. Right, let's just fix that error. UK button left. So let's take a look at that again. Back to our browser. Let's reload. We can see that link has gone a bit smaller. We now got some like an underline, which is now taking place. So that's fine. We're relatively happy with that. We might adjust it as we go along, but we can actually try and log in again. Nothing should happen. Well, we should be able to log in like we would. So log in, and you can see that we're also getting that very nice message at the very top. Since we've wrapped that flash message within that div element from our layout.html template. So if you click it, it disappears. If I log out, I'm able to log out, log in again, same process. And if I try to access the login route again, you see it's kicking me out and it says that you are already logged in. So that's working fine. The CSS is applied to all the elements perfectly fine, but that's how we're going to leave it going forward. Right, so that's a quick video on what I wanted to demonstrate and how we go about adding CSS and JavaScript to our application. I mean, the bulk of it is already created. It's as simple as adding a couple of methods into our layout.html file and have that filter down to all the templates that extend into that file. So that's a quick video, guys. I hope that one brings you a little bit of value, because I've been asked some questions about how we add CSS in. This is pretty much how you do that through your assets.yml file, and you can set whether you want it to be enable or disable, and then you've got full control over how you want to display your CSS. So that's it for this quick video, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. See you in the next video coming up very shortly. Peace.